Ayaka. I'm a consultant with LSAT Unplugged. Thank you for joining today. And if you're listening to the YouTube or a podcast, welcome. Today, as we're going through this essay writing personal statement series here this November, I know it's right before Thanksgiving. If you're here live, we're kind of getting on the tail end of the series. And so hopefully if you're listening to this, you've had a couple drafts written of, either your personal statement, diversity statement, any sort of essay you're writing for your application. At this point, you probably have written a couple drafts, you've done some edits, and you may be ready to kind of show your essay to other people, send it to other people, and have them take a look. And I think this is kind of a critical point to stop and think about how you want this editing process to go for you. And so I will pull up my presentation. And this is called Draft Management and Pushing Your Essay Forward. It's kind of a hybrid of technique and also a checklist. So hopefully this is helpful to you when you're at this point and you're ready to kind of disperse your essays. So first, when I talk about draft management, I do want to talk about why we do it. You do want to keep track of the progression of your essays. Hi, Clint. Welcome. So we're talking about draft management today and pushing your essay forward. Why we do draft management. We do this so you keep track of where your essay is going, what changes you've made, and also keeping a history of what you've written before. Many times, and I've said this before, my ideal first draft is writing probably 2 to 3 times the number of pages that you are asked to write. You are giving more than what you're being asked. And sometimes we just need to put words to a story that we have in our head. We want to touch on certain things that we don't know how it would fit in the essay, but you want to put it out there. You want to put it in words. There may be other things that you're exploring as you write. And then it's a cutting game in terms of editing. With draft management, you're keeping track of all of it. So once you write that first draft, second draft, third draft, you want to keep track of it. You don't necessarily want to get rid of a draft that you've written, because sometimes, and I do this a lot, even in my professional life, I'll write a draft. I'll say, okay, that's not a great way to word it. Let me reword it. And then kind of the intent changes. And I'm like, okay, wait, now the wording's too different. I've lost kind of the essence of what we're writing. So we occasionally do want to go back and think about what we've written and kind of review what we've already written and say, okay, what is the essence that we've written there? How can I represent it better here? Or sometimes we're like, I totally cut that story out and I want to bring it back. So there are benefits to managing your drafts. And you may have heard me say, occasionally we may want to pull elements out of that original draft and say, okay, these are the things I want to talk about in my personal statement. These are the things that I want to talk in my diversity statement, and kind of split those essays up. And when we do that, we can find, the roots of things that we've said in one essay and then say, okay, these are moving to this essay. So kind of managing all of that in terms of a cohesive story and kind of making sure you're covering what you want to cover is part of draft management. How to successfully manage drafts. I've seen multiple ways to do it. Some people date it. I think dating it is okay unless you're rereading the essay multiple times a day. And that can happen more often on the tail end of editing. So there you can get into a little bit of issues. I like to number mine because you can have an infinite number of drafts if you use numbers. And I'm very anal in that any changes made, even if I just take a look and, change a word, change a letter, and that's all the changes I made that day, I'm going to save it as a new draft. I know there's tracking changes in Google Docs or Word, or whatever writing tool you guys use, which is fine. However, it can get really confusing. I know in essay editing for students that I work with, when we use track changes, we kind of lose sight of how long the essay is, because the track changes will add on to the length of the essay. So you may want to, I understand the benefit of using track changes, but you may want to consider using other ways to manage your drafts. Okay, so, and we'll come back to this conversation a little bit. I also want to talk about pushing your essays forward. So this is for people who are on their second, third, fourth, draft and are looking to push that draft out to friends, family, people they know, people who read essays, all of that. When you want to make editing changes to your essay, it may be really hard to get out of your own head and out of your own box. Sometimes you're like, this is how I need to tell my story. And so we get stuck in that. So these are the things to consider when you're in that space. Not necessarily stuck, but in a space where you're ready to kind of show your essay to others. So first is a self-editing checklist. These are big checklist items. It's not comprehensive, but we'll go through it. And then the second is finding your editing circle. As you may know already, not everyone is a great essay editor, and not everyone is a great application essay editor. Writing for an application, personal statement, diversity statement, it's actually a very specific kind of writing that you're doing, and you're probably not going to do it at work unless you're someone who helps write essays professionally. You're probably not going to do it anywhere else in your professional life. And it's, you don't do it academically either. If your papers are more fact-based and really exploring language, for example, and the type of writing that you're doing for personal statements, diversity statements is really particular. So you may know people who are editors, or they're the smartest person you know, and they might not be the best editor for you. So we'll kind of dig deeper into that. First, let's talk about self-editing checklist. So the self-editing checklist, these are kind of the big, major first things I do when I look at a student's essay. And this will kind of help reframe a lot of things that maybe not working for that person's essay. A lot of times, and especially students who are writing general topic essays, Black Lives Matter, COVID, 9/11, the environment, all of those things, these big kind of general idea essays, you get a lot of we statements or general statements, right? For example, we believe X, Y, and Z, or there is an environmental disaster that's waiting to happen. Very general statements. And those statements we kind of need to get rid of in a personal statement, because they're not personal. They take what is our personal story and kind of blur that image. And it's great when you're speaking to an audience where you can have tone and you can have questions and all of that, but in a personal statement, it doesn't come off the paper well. So really look at the we statements. Every student who had a we statement in their essay has successfully taken it out. without changing what they were intending to say. And actually you end up in a better place because you're making it more personal. And by having that personal piece, you're showing what your thought process is, or how you can take action, or a different quality about yourself. And I think that's better than making a general statement out there. Second, is your hook relevant? You know, occasionally we find, not occasionally, a majority of times we find students who have thought about their personal statement and say, this is actually kind of how I want to start my story. I think it'll be great. Awesome. But we never refer back to that story. And actually they introduce a second story to kind of move their essay forward. Well, why have that hook? And I asked this question because admissions, it's their job to read your essay. You don't need to make the first 2 sentences or a paragraph overly interesting to convince someone to read your essay. They're going to read your essay regardless. So if the whole essay isn't interesting, that's kind of the problem. And what you'll get is students who make that first paragraph way too interesting, and then they dip down and they start talking, and then they're like, oh, I need to introduce a new story to kind of explain why I'm doing something. And then you're like, why did you have that story in the first place if you're never going to refer back to it? So think about that hook. 9 times out of 10, we're cutting that first paragraph because it just floats. So and you can do this editing yourself. So think about it. Think about whether that hook is absolutely necessary for you in your essay, and why is it necessary for you to be there. Third, where does the why law school / law career show up in your essay? Many times we see students who have their why law school as part of their conclusion, as part of the last sentence of their essay. And you really want to think about the purpose of your personal statement. The admissions officers say, hey, we want to get to know you better. I say this application, you're applying to a professional school. So it is a professional piece of writing, and you're trying to make your case for why you're pursuing a legal career or law school, right? Whichever one fits your narrative better. But if your why legal career / law school is coming in at the last sentence or at the conclusion, I think it would be difficult for someone to track a story all the way to the end and then say, oh, and this is why I want to go to law school. And you're like, oh, okay, where are we going with that? So consider where it is, what percentage of your essay are you dedicating to that question, and can you bring it forward? Many times I challenge students to bring that why law school, why law career conversation to the midpoint of your essay. So probably the beginning of page 2, right? And people are like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do it. And it's actually, if you challenge yourself to do that, you may see yourself reframing your story a little bit, or kind of restructuring that essay a little bit to match that intent. The intent is not to tell an elaborative story. The intent is to tell us why you're pursuing the career that you're pursuing. Sometimes it's a career change. Sometimes it's a start of a career. Why are you there? And you don't want that to come at the last sentence. In consideration with that, think about how much space you're spending on your hook. Sometimes people spend a whole page on their hook. And is that really necessary? I don't think so. Some people spend half a page on describing the school. For example, I've definitely seen essays where they're like, the campus is beautiful, the faculty is awesome, X, Y, and Z, they're praising the school. All good things to know, the school knows who they are. So you really don't need to explain the school to people. They know. So, you know, think about how much space and time you're spending on items that are not yourself and not the important things that you need to tell in your essay. I'm going to pause here. I know there's a couple people here in the room. Are there any questions? And welcome in. I know, Alyssa, I saw you come in. Great. Okay, awesome. I'm moving on, and we'll have time for questions after as well. Editing circles. So this is finding your people to edit your essays. I know I said this in the very beginning. First, find people who will give you constructive feedback. And this may be hard to know off the bat. There are people who will read your essay and say, I think it's great. Is that productive? Maybe for, you know, for yourself to feel confident about your essay? Yeah, maybe. Is it more important to get constructive feedback that says, hey, I think this part of your essay works, this part of your essay doesn't, I don't understand what is going on here, can you give me clarity? I think that feedback is much better than, I think it's great. Granted, you don't want someone who comes out with their guns blaring and saying, this essay is horrible, blah, blah, like, no. So we want to find someone who can give you balanced feedback. One thing that I will put out there is that you don't need to question your why law school or why law career. Your reasons to go to law school is your reason to go to law school. It doesn't need to make, I don't want to say logical sense, but it doesn't need to be 1 + 1 = 2, right? If you say, this is a reason why I'm going to law school, I believe you, and admissions will believe you. They're not going to be like, well, I guess you should actually apply to public policy school, right? That's not the mindset that's going on there. So whatever reason you gave is valid. So there are people who read your essay and be like, I don't think this is a valid reasoning to give to go to law school. And that can be said about anything. So be very careful about that kind of feedback. But the feedback that you're looking for may be, and this depends on what stage of essay you're in, maybe stylistic, word choice, structure, tone, the ease of reading. Any one of those things are valid. And I think you should give the consideration points for feedback. And this is the second point here. If I gave my essay to a particular person who is not part of, for example, who I've known since high school, they know me very well. I could say, hey, can you read this and tell me if it sounds like myself? Do you hear my tone of voice? Do you hear me telling this story to you? That can be an important piece of feedback that you get. And then you could also give it to someone in your professional life and say, hey, can you take a look at this essay? Do you think it does, it's an easy to read essay? So there are different things that you can ask from different readers. And then also one thing to consider in the feedback, those of you who've had a couple of years of professional experience or who are currently working, you are in your field 24/7, right? Like your mind is there. So you may be used to terminology, jargon, any number of things. And you want at least one person who is not part of your field to read your essay. And that's because we can get used to talking in jargon, being able to communicate in abbreviations or acronyms. And most likely the person that's reading your essay for admissions is not going to know everything and anything about your field and understand that the way that you understand it. So, for example, Alyssa, who used to run this class with me, she was a dancer, or she is a dancer, and she has terminology along the lines of, dance terminology. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And it's kind of hard to hear, but also it lets you know that, oh, I'm using terminology that not everyone understands. So it will require you to kind of explain what you're talking about a little more. So be careful and take note of those people who say, hey, actually, this is really hard for me to understand. That's not a criticism of you as a person. It's a criticism of, hey, the topic that you're talking about is a little bit more nuanced, and the terminology that you're using is not part of common knowledge. So you need to explain it more. And that can give you a direction on how you need to set up your essay better. Lastly, so that was part of the third point as well. Find people who may not be familiar with the field you're in. This can really help you figure out what you need to explain more in your essay. Now, coming full circle back to draft management, when you send your essays out to those who are reading, editing your drafts, be aware that there are multiple kinds of people who, there's people who want to do direct edits into your essay. There may be people who want to give you written, like a general written notes kind of feedback. There may be people who give you, I do this a lot, give voicemail feedback. So there's different ways to give feedback, but you don't want to mess up your draft management. So going back, you should really have your own copy that you are keeping track of your edits that you make. Give a dummy copy to everyone who is editing your essay. Make sure you collect all of those and make sure that they're not making permanent changes to your working draft. I've seen it happen where somebody made a permanent change to their working draft and they didn't notice, because you get used to reading your essay, so you start skimming your essay and then you're like, wait, I didn't write that. And there was like a comment floating in the essay, and when it came to me, I was like, look, there's a floating comment in the middle of it. Is this something that you intended to keep in there? So really make sure that you're managing your draft, protecting your working draft, and giving a copy that others feel like they can either make direct edits in or write comments in, so that you can actually collect it in a way that you can use. And that can really help you in pushing that essay forward to your fourth, fifth, and final drafts. That's really the lecture piece of this session today. Any questions out there? I know I talked for 20 minutes straight, so any questions out there?
Will there be times to read just like our intros, paragraphs, or each section of our writing? Is there like a class section to do that?
Yeah, so I have an essay session planned for sometime in December, mid-December, I believe, Jeff, and please correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. We have a few students here today. If you're ready to kind of show your draft, I'm happy to take a look at an intro if you're up to it. I'm sorry. It sounds like I'm putting you on the spot, but
no, I have an intro. Yeah, I mean, I have an intro.
Or we can talk about, and Matthew, I see that you're saying you're willing to share as well. We can also do a sort of live brainstorming session of like, you want to talk about that. And then Clint, I know you talked about last week, I think, something, your idea for an essay. But we can also do a live kind of brainstorming session here since we have a little bit of time left. How do we feel? Matthew, I see you're willing to share. Alyssa, I see you're willing to share. Clint, I know you came off mute first, so I do want to give you a chance to.
Yeah, I'm willing to share.
Okay.
Brainstorm, whichever.
Yeah, I do want to get to all three of you here today since you showed up the day before Thanksgiving. So it may be a quick and dirty, but we'll do it. So let me stop sharing. And I do encourage Matthew and Alyssa, you guys to either comment in the chat or come off mute and give feedback as well.
Sure, that sounds good.
Awesome.
So apologies, I was digging up the document. How did we want to go about this?
Let me ask Clint, are you ready to share, or do you want us to move to Matthew first?
I can read I don't care. I don't have a preference of who goes first or who.
Clint, I defer to you, please.
All right, why not?
Clint, do you have a shareable document?
Oh, I have a Word document, but I'm not sure how to share that in this segment or this Zoom session. No, I don't know how to do that.
Okay, you should have, if you're on your laptop, you should have a share screen button at the bottom.
On my Word document or here on this Zoom chat?
On this Zoom chat.
I have security participants. Oh, share screen.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Boom, 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 boom.
If you can share your document.
I'll see if this works. I don't know. Can you see it or?
Yes, perfect.
All right.
Why don't I
read it, or do you? How do we?
I'll read the first paragraph and then we can give some feedback.
Yeah, I was kind of deciding where to go with the second portion of it. It's very new. Or
perfect. We can brainstorm together. Let's do it. Okay, so keep it there. I will read it, and if you can scroll for me.
Sorry. Yeah, my bad. I keep on thinking I'm feeling scared. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. When deciding upon a career path, I have often found that people tend to follow a parental guidance of influence. When discussing with friends, acquaintances, etc., the typical answer is, my father's a doctor, so I decided to go into the medical field. When it pertains to becoming a lawyer, the answer usually circles back to, I have a long list of family members that worked in the legal field. But what happens when your father is part of an Italian-American crime family? Are you to follow the footsteps of your father walked into? And the stories you hear aren't of the usual family conversations, rather vile topics of your father and grandfather going to the same social club as John Gotti, or hearing about a man who is an expert at getting rid of a body. While the movies glamorize this lifestyle, it all comes crashing down and families are left trying to piece together an impossible life puzzle. And so with someone of my background, why do I want to attend law school? The answer is, becoming a lawyer was the faintest of ideas. I did not come from a family of law, nor did I envision becoming a lawyer from a young age. In fact, it was a criminal justice field that I was motivated to join at first. Contrary to belief, seeing the FBI agents from a young age made me believe that I could make a difference through becoming a police officer. Okay, great start. I can get a feel of kind of what you're setting up kind of the background, right? Of like where you're coming from. And you're trying to put in context your experience contrast to other people's other people's experience, right? Am I getting that right?
Oh, oh, sorry. Yeah, yes, correct. Yes. Yeah, kind of just lead into the I know we mentioned the last one, kind of the hook there, and then stemming from joining the criminal justice field, the reason to join the criminal justice field, the hook, And then my next kind of lead point would probably be what I discovered in the criminal justice field. And then as the kind of, I guess, third paragraph or closer to the conclusion paragraphs would be, I guess, still kind of the middle paragraph, why law school as a result of, I feel like the criminal justice field doesn't help the victims, so to speak. And
Sure.
that's why I wanted, to become a lawyer to help victims in need.
Perfect. I think that's a great direction that you're going in. If I may encourage you to kind of double click into starting in the middle of that first paragraph of, you're starting to talk about your father's involvement in the Italian American crime family, kind of your thought process there, right? Because clearly there was some sort of change that went through between knowing your family's history and going into criminal justice, right? Even in that first iteration of your career choice and your academic choices. So if you can kind of double click into there and talk about that a little bit, then it could probably echo better when you're talking about your decision to go to law school.
Sure. Which section now or part?
Right where your mouse is, right there. Yeah, if you can kind of elaborate on your kind of inner monologue of what's going on in your mind there.
Okay. I'm just gonna write like a little note right now.
Yeah, go ahead and do that. I see there's, Alyssa saying a great hook. Matthew saying powerful. So clearly this is a powerful story that you're introducing here, which is great. Yeah. And I think let me kind of give you the note that I don't want you to dwell too much on what's happened. I know you kind of explained, your mom struggled as well, in line with your family history, like with that, because of it, your mom struggled as well. And, you had a tough time growing up. I would be very upfront with that information. But don't kind of dwell on it too much in terms of like adding detail to that story. I think just kind of be like, this happened, we struggled, X, Y, and Z happened, and then move on to your inner feelings, why you're pursuing law school, and kind of that switch from your family history to kind of being on the other side of that. And that's probably the interesting story rather than the struggle that you went through. So I would really kind of focus on that flip between reconciling your family history and going to law school.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
Now, would you say after this paragraph to focus, that is where I make that flip as to what I discovered in the criminal justice field and then why the flip to law school? You would recommend that after this?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
kind of coming out of that criminal justice field and saying, because I remember you saying like, look, that's not really where you found justice for the victims and kind of helping victims was not in the criminal justice field. It was more in the field that you're looking at right now, which is law school and the legal career that you're looking at. So kind of that explanation probably needs to be elaborated on.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Do we feel good about your direction that you're going in?
Yeah, real good direction.
Great.
Hopefully next class, if there's same amount of people like this, hopefully I'll have more.
For sure.
Yeah, thank you.
For sure. Yeah. All right, Matthew, you're up next. And you should have co-hosting, so you should be able to share your screen if you have a draft there.
You bet. Let me pull it up here and see what we can do. I'm gonna blow this up a little bit. I want to make sure it's visible. Okay.
Excuse me.
Okay, so you should be able to see this now.
I'm like, all right, let me get closer.
Sorry,
Um,
let me
no worries.
blow it up. Let me blow it up a little bit here.
Okay, so we'll
Does that
do
help?
maybe the first 3 paragraphs. So once I get to the bottom of that second paragraph, if you can scroll down a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So early in my career with the utility company, while working full time, I decided to go back to college as a part-time student at Washington State University. in Vancouver.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I think.
Oh,
No, I'm sorry. Here it is. Okay.
no worries. All right.
Here's the entry. I'm sorry.
Okay. When I was approximately 11 to 12 years old, I started experiencing severe pain in my left hip for unknown reasons. The symptoms were acute and the pain intense. There was no cause known, and the condition was a mystery. After many consultations with medical professionals, I was finally diagnosed with leg calf. I'm sorry, I can't.
That's right. You can just say the initials. It's fine. No worries.
LCPD. My particular affliction was unique as I had a severe case and contracted the disease later than most. Those that are affected by LCPD are usually males, and they tend to contract the disease between the age of 4 and 10. Favorite childhood activities such as baseball, my favorite sport, running, and bike riding were no longer possible. For the next 6 years, I would undergo several surgeries and procedures, none of which relieve the pain or otherwise stabilize my hip joint to a sufficient level. The decision was made in 1990 to 1991 to have hip fusion surgery to fortify the joint that reduce osteoarthritis. During this time, I spent 6 months in a body cast and spent most of a year of high school at home with the aid of tutors who ensured I did not fall behind academically. It is to the credit of the amazing tutors that I was able to graduate from high school without delay. The 6 months in a body cast were difficult for me mentally and emotionally. I was limited to a wheelchair and used a walker for short distances. It taught me how strong the mind can be to enjoy reading and learning. Looking back, I suggest this was my first experience with what college was going to feel like, and I loved it. I enjoyed the self-motivation that, could you scroll down a little bit? That individual study requires an ownership and responsibility I have for my learning. So, okay, let's stop there for a second. Sorry, could you scroll back up? I'm sorry. So, thank you for sharing this story. I am, my heart goes out to you that you experienced this at such a young age. And I think this essay really could show a lot of power in how much you have over ownership of like your, I don't want to say destiny, but your life, right? It's really easy to kind of get down about yourself and, kind of have a lot of pity for yourself, but clearly this hasn't stopped you. So thank you for sharing this story. And I think, it's a great start to this essay. Some kind of suggestions I'll give. Part of what I presented today, kind of general conversation of and statements here and there in your essay. I would really reflect it and say, this was what went through my mind. This is how I approached this and how you approached kind of dealing with it. And I know you kind of get to it and trim out a little bit of the general things. It would make it a little bit more like you, like more powerful in terms of you taking ownership of your story. Does that make sense, Matthew?
It does. So maybe condense it a bit.
Yeah. Because you're spending really 3 paragraphs progression of your illness and kind of what's happening out of that. So I would really try to condense them down to a page. I know it's hard. But really, so kind of question some parts of the, like, for example, the last sentence of those that are affected by LCPD are usually like that second to last line in the first paragraph. Is that really in terms of what I need to know about you?
Right.
Maybe. Right. So like those are the things that I consider to be general information that really absolutely need to know this in order to understand your story.
Mhm.
I see the chat is coming in. Yeah, I love that, Alyssa, putting the ownership of learning. Clearly, this didn't stop you from graduating from high school. So put that in the, you should be proud of that.
All right, I am taking notes like crazy. Thank you for the fresh set of eyes and suggestions. It's very, very helpful.
Absolutely. This is what we yeah. And I think, I'm looking at the first 3 paragraphs, we have a lot more to look at. I think here, I know the writing style and maybe of adding more I into the sentences can help you take a little bit more ownership of what you're feeling here. First sentence of the 3rd paragraph, the 6 months in a body cast for me mentally and emotionally. I was limited to a wheelchair and used a walker for short distances. I know it's a me sentences there, but I'm kind of looking for what's going on in mind, right? Being limited to a wheelchair, difficult. Not being able to, take when you want to must be difficult. Tell us what's in your mind. So I know it's a really small thing, but you can kind of push it out, because what's going on tells me more about who you are than you being diagnosed with it. Does that make sense?
It does.
Because the illness doesn't define you, right? Drive and your push to more with your life than just be diagnosed is who you are. And that's why you're applying to law school. So I think that's kind of where we want to get to in a story like this.
Got it. Thank you very much. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to Alyssa. I have enough time. Alyssa, if you want to share your.
Yes. Oh, wait. I want this one. My bad. Yeah, I was going to show my diversity statement instead of the personal statement, because this one is shorter and it needs more work.
Perfect. So I'll do the first couple paragraphs. In first grade, I remember my art teacher referencing the, Baha'i temple in our local community as an architectural wonder and a prime example of artistic achievement. I proudly raised my hand and exclaimed to the class, "I'm Baha'i." The other students looked at me with fascination and murmured amongst themselves how intriguing this was. My eagerness to proclaim my membership to this minority religion, however, is not a right that all Baha'is possess. At a young age, I learned that the other side of the globe, Baha'is were being oppressed daily. Since its inception in 1844, the Baha'i faith has been persecuted in the Middle East, particularly in its birthplace in Iran. More than 20,000 Baha'is in Iran alone have been killed. The United Nations has passed resolutions critiquing the government, and even the US government incorporated Senate Resolution 183, which condemns the persecution of Baha'i and demands the release for prisoners. The Senate resolution was declared in 1982, 1984, 1988, and almost every year after that. Yet, after decades of effort, these persecutions still persist. When I attended Baha'is children's class every Sunday, we were often taught a virtue of the week. During our first week, we discussed truth. Truthfulness is the foundation of all human virtues. My teacher would eagerly say to us, in my opinion, humanity has deviated from the essential truth, the oneness of humanity. Combining the teachings I learned as a child in Sunday school with the brutal reality of global politics today, I learned that no matter how many resolutions are passed or criticisms by politicians are uttered, that alone would not change the world. The persecution of Baha'is and other minorities is not simply a legal matter, but also a matter of human heart. Okay, let's stop there. Okay, so great start to a diversity statement. Clearly, you're going for a sort of cultural / religious diversity angle, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if you've listened to any of the other classes about diversity statements. My view on diversity statement, and if you don't agree, that's totally fine. My view on diversity statement is, number one, you need to tell us why that's a diverse point of view and how that's going to show up in the classroom or your legal career, right? I think those are the two main points of a diversity statement. And this doesn't have to be cultural, religious, race. It could be gender, it could be job experience, it could be an interesting experience you had in your life, anything out there. They make it very, very broad. This clearly fits into that cultural and religious diversity, which is great, amazing. What I think is missing and kind of doing you a disservice right now is I actually don't know what it means to you to be part of the Baha'i temple.
Okay.
And I don't mean this in any sort of discriminatory way. I am just not educated in knowing what the temple stands for or what sort of values you may have as being part of this religion. So I think, especially for this type of essay, you need to frame that in the very beginning and say, you know, what it means to be part of the Baha'i temple for you is to be X, Y, and Z, right? So to give you an example, if I'm Japanese American, and I say, you know, a big part of my culture is that family is your rock, it's your base. Like, filial piety is the most important thing in your life. That's kind of the framework. So, and if I just said, hey, I'm Japanese American, you may not know that about Japanese culture. So how am I supposed to understand, you know, how are you supposed to understand that I consider family or filial piety as very, very high on my priority list if I don't explain that out to you, right? So that's kind of where I'm getting at with your essay, is I actually don't know what you mean when you say I am Baha'i, right? Like, I would love to like intrinsically know that, but I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of admissions officers out there who are not going to know what that means. So you should really spell that out.
Okay. No, that definitely makes sense. I will definitely do that.
Yeah. With your second paragraph, I think important information, right? Clearly, you know, there's some not great things that are happening out there, and there's a lot of inaction. And I think that's kind of what you're pointing at, is that there's not a lot of action that's happening to protect people. I think there's a simpler way to put it.
Okay.
Dates that are not significant to you. And if I may say, I don't think anyone is alive who is from 1844. And I understand it is the birth of the religion. However, it is not your personal experience there. So and this is kind of a rule that I personally have for essays, is dates don't mean too much to people who read essays, who are not closely related to you, know you as personally. Dates are just going to fly over people's heads. So you're kind of wasting precious space by including dates.
So would it be sufficient to just say since its inception and just get rid of?
Yeah,
say- Yeah, okay.
I think so. And to be honest, I'm like, this is really important information that's out there. And I understand it needs to be heard. However, does it need to be heard in your diversity statement? I'm not sure in terms of what, the Senate Resolution 183, or, that it was declared in 1982, 1984, 1988. Is it important? Yes. Is it important to be in your essay? I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you can, in the second half of your essay, if you make sure to kind of refer back to, and I'm hoping that you make the changes to your first half of the essay to say, to be Baha'i or be part of the Baha'i temple is X, Y, and Z. And these are the qualities that I uphold in my life. And then if you can kind of turn that into, in my legal career, in law school or whatever, these are the qualities I intend to bring.
Okay.
And wrap it up in that way. I think that would be a great essay for you.
Okay. Yeah, because that's what I was trying to do towards the end. But
Mhm.
maybe it just takes too long to get there. And are you saying I should mention those things earlier on in the paper?
Yeah, I think you need to frame it really early on, or
Okay.
else I don't actually know which direction we're going here. Yeah, I think the earlier you identify it and say, these are the things that are going to get me to law school and what I'm going to bring to law school or to my legal career, the more I'm like, okay, we're focused on this, rather than saying, okay, I don't know what this means, but okay, we'll go forward. And you don't want to give the space for the essay reader to kind of wander in your essay.
Mhm.
And that's something that we'll talk about kind of next week in terms of finishing off your essay, is like, you don't want to give room for questions to come up in your essay, but you also don't want to give space for wandering. Wandering gives people like an option to kind of gravitate towards details that might not be important, and then you're kind of bringing in important stuff later on. You really want to give that roadmap in the beginning, so the reader knows exactly, okay, this is where we're headed, this is the diversity piece that's coming in, and then okay, it's an easy conclusion to come to, right?
Right.
You don't want to give a confusing essay.
No, that totally makes sense. Because even when I was reading, or you were reading it, I was like, wait, they're not going to get this. So that was helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's great that you noticed that as I was reading it, because I was like, okay, great history here, and I want to know more, but I don't want the essay reader to want to know more just about the Baha'i temple, right? I want to know more about you and how this religion and cultural background is going to make you a great addition to a law school class. And that's the role of the diversity statement, is to say, hey, look, this is what I'll bring to the classroom. And so that's kind of the mindset that you probably needed, which I'm glad you kind of noticed as I was reading.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you. This was helpful.
Yeah. And I know we kind of quickly went through 3 intros into people's essays, but any like floating questions out there? We have a few minutes left.
I have a question. So I am a non-traditional student, and for example, I've been with my employer now for like almost 24 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't been in college since graduate school in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of, is that something that you would recommend highlighting in the personal statement, to try to appeal as a non-traditional student to, basically just kind of get some attention in the crowd and in terms of the pile of applications? Does that make sense? hopefully I'm articulating that.
I totally get you. Great question. So I think, I mean, first off, welcome. We love non-traditional students. I'm also a non-traditional student, so you are welcome to the team. I think there is no need to particularly highlight the fact that you are a non-traditional student. They will get that. Admissions will see it in your resume. So there's no need to be like, hello, my name is Matthew and I am a non-traditional student. Like that's not what you need to do. I would say for someone who has had 20 years of a career, you may want to touch on the fact that this is a career change for you and what the thought process was in getting to that career change. Because I know when we read the intro to your essay, you started off as a 11 to 12-year-old person with an illness, and you're kind of describing that overcoming that hurdle, and that was in the first 3 paragraphs. I'm assuming you're going to follow up with some conversation or some story that happened in your career. But I think you have to be very careful in that you don't want to say, your passion for law school started when you were 10 years old and you've held on to that for however many years that you've had a career, right? Because clearly you're making this switch from the career that you already have to law school to a legal career at this point. So I think you need to make sure that change is clear, and you don't want it to sound like, oh, this person just did this on a whim, right? So
Right.
Explain that. And I think that should probably be a highlight in your essay, to say, these are the reasons why I'm going to law school. And it should be very clear. You shouldn't and don't need to go through your resume to explain your career.
Sure.
I think you could, and Matthew, for you, since you've had such a long career, you can even have the whole essay focused on one episode in your career, right? So I think that's up to you and how you want to set up that essay. But for you, it probably would be imperative to talk about why you're making that career switch.
Sure. So for example, if I were to communicate, my career has been based upon, helping others, service to others. And, I'm in admittedly the latter third of my career. And what's driving this decision is my wanting to help others.
Mhm.
And I can't think of, other than medicine, I can't think of a more powerful set of tools by which to help others than law. And it's something that I can envision doing as long as I can, maybe until 70 or 75.
Mhm.
And if I were to articulate that in a personal statement, do you think that would get, in your experience, would that be the direction that you would recommend?
I like that direction. I think if you can give a little bit more context of, I know you said like your career is based on helping others. Can you give a little bit more context? For example, I think you and I have a very different career, right? I am in tech in general, but I have a little bit of a background in cybersecurity. And what it means for me to help others in that field is, and I hope you're not in cybersecurity, because then this would sound a little bit stupid, but that helping others in that context is a little bit different than helping others, for example, in terms of a nonprofit, right? So I would love a little bit more context and how you have taken that context and how you're planning to help others further with a legal career mindset or a law degree. I think that would be the way for you to go in your essay. Does that make sense?
It sure does. It sure does. Yeah, and at the very bottom of my personal statement is where I kind of explain, who I want to help, But going back to what you were talking about earlier, in your workshop here, I probably want to move that up in the document a little bit rather than having it at the very end, where you finally have the hook at the very end. It's probably a better idea to introduce that earlier.
Yeah, I think it should be somewhere in the middle of your essay, or even probably the bottom third at the latest is where I personally feel comfortable putting a why, kind of who you're trying to help, why you're trying to do it, what's motivating you to do it. If I may put an idea out there for you, Matthew, I know your essay started off with your childhood with the disease, the diagnosis with the disease, and I'm sure you're going to talk about your career and then why law school. I encourage you to write out that essay. Don't think about a page limit, just write it out. I can see how that first part that we read today, that can turn into a diversity statement or an optional essay if the school that you're applying to has an optional essay portion. You could really break that out, because I'm sure there's more things you can tell than you can fit into 2 pages.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you, Alyssa, and thank you, Clinton, for your feedback and sharing. And I very much appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all for joining today. I know we're at the top of the hour. Thank you for joining the night before Thanksgiving. I hope you guys have time to kind of, add more to your essay. We do have class next week. Feel free to bring your drafts again. We'll do a draft reading, a dedicated class for draft reading in mid-December. But if we have time again, we can do some short feedback. Love the energy here, and thank you for participating in the chat as well. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night.
Have a good night.
I have a super quick question. So I put my essays in the Dropbox. Are we going to receive feedback from that?
So if you drop it in the Dropbox, that's where we collect essays, and I will read a good number of them, maybe not all, in that December live reading class. So yours, if it's in there, I'll try to have it in the lineup, so we can read it in mid-December.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.